The children's book Are You Here With Me was published back in March of 2023 by a woman named Corey Richins. The book on its surface was a 42-page book. It was a children's book that was directed towards children dealing with grief or the loss of a loved one. It was intended to basically help kids cope with the death of a loved one and view death not as a scary thing but more of a peaceful thing, which I think is very, very important. I feel like if you're a young child and you experience a death that is very close to you, it's also very important to teach that child very young how to cope with their pain in healthy ways. So on the surface, this seemed like a book that everybody wanted to buy, and Corey Richins even went on daytime television to promote this book as well. She would say in that interview that the reason why she wrote the book was because a year prior, her husband Eric Richins had unfortunately passed away, and after this death, it left a huge effect on the family, where Corey, as the adult, she understood death and she understood how to process it. But as for her children, they were just kind of left blindsided and didn't really know how to cope or process with any of the emotions, and that's what inspired her to write the book Are You Here With Me? But what Corey didn't mention in that interview was the reason as to why her husband had passed away. And she also couldn't legally say why her husband had passed away either, because Corey was currently under investigation for poisoning and murdering her husband that later led to his death. Now, this wasn't just a conspiracy or a rumor. The police had actually gotten in contact with two of Corey's dealers that she had gotten these drugs from and proved two previous poisoning attempts and murder of her husband that were both unsuccessful. So technically, Corey had written this book about grief, about her husband, about her children's father, gave this book to her children to help with the process of that grief, but she was the one that actually poisoned and murdered her husband, and the reason as to why her children had to grieve and cope in the first place. Located in northern Utah was a very small town by the name of Camas. Camas only had a population of about 2,500 people, so it was a very, very small town. And in this town was the Richins family. The Richins family comprised of 39-year-old Eric Richins, 33-year-old Corey Richins, and their three young sons. So a little bit of backstory on Eric Richins. Eric Richins was actually born in Bountiful, Utah, and grew up Mormon. So he grew up going to church every single day. He even worked for the church, but one of his favorite hobbies to do was to go hunting. So he would often go hunting with his friends and his friends' dad. He would even travel out to places like Africa and Mexico and Canada to even attend hunting conventions. Eric would later go on to University of Utah, where he got his bachelor's in international studies and even minored in Spanish. And in college, he had moved to Mexico for a year to complete his schoolwork and learn fluent Spanish. And also, whilst in college, Eric would create his own business with his friend Cody called C&E Masonry, where him and Cody would basically go around to homes, businesses, and just do stonework. So they would do things like masonry, pave work, tile work, and this was something that they did for a living. And then over time, their business actually grew to be really, really successful. In 2009, Eric would graduate from college and actually go on to marry a woman named Julie, but unfortunately in 2011, Julie had passed away in a car accident, and then 2 years later, in 2013, is when Eric would meet Corey. Corey and Eric would actually meet through a mutual friend of theirs named Linda King, who knew both Corey and Eric and thought that they would be a perfect match, so the two of them ended up going on a date together. They ended up dating and then later got married that same exact year, June 15th of 2013, where they had a very small backyard wedding with all of their family. And at the marriage, Eric would also make Corey sign a prenup. So as for a little bit of backstory onto Corey. So Corey was a real estate agent and was born in Utah and even got her degree as well with her bachelor's in human resources. Her very first job was at a specialty clinic where she worked there for a couple years, and then she also did part-time at Home Depot until 2013 she decided to do full-time medical and quit her job at Home Depot. She was only doing medical for a couple of years though until she started to kind of lose her spot spark. So then that's when she got her real estate license and even went on to buy a couple of offices in downtown Utah Park City and started her own business called K. Richins Realty. Now, this wasn't Corey's only business. Back in 2010, she had even started her own housekeeping business. And K. Richins Realty was a realtor company that only specialized in specifically mansions and million-dollar homes. And then over time, the couple would go on to have 3 sons together, and it seemed like they were just one big happy family. They would go all the time to different baseball games. Even Corey and Eric seemed to be very much in love, and Eric was a wonderful father to his children. He loved going on hunting trips with all of his kids. He even coached all of his sons' sports, so he coached basketball, baseball, and soccer. And Eric was also said to be a very outdoorsy person. He owned a lot of ATVs and four-wheelers, and even though he was super outdoorsy, he was also the type of person that wasn't really afraid of getting hurt. So he actually in his family held the record for the most amount of stitches, and one time he had actually gotten 100 stitches on his face due to one of his collisions. And even while raising his kids, Eric's business started to really pick up off the ground, where now they were making tons and tons of money, had tons of clientele, even more employees. And even though Eric was getting all of this money, he still made sure to give back to his community. So he would donate a lot of his money to certain charities, and he would even do volunteer work in the town. If the town was having some sort of like search and rescue team, he would volunteer to be a part of that, because with his knowledge of being in the outdoors and survival, he could apply that knowledge to the volunteer work. So all around, he seemed like such a great person. And so since things at Eric's business was going so well, that's when Corey didn't really quit her job completely. She just more dedicated her time to buying and flipping houses. So she still had her realtor business, but she wasn't going out there and finding houses and selling houses. She was just more buying them, flipping them, and then selling them. And then in 2017 is when Corey would buy a piece of land for $2 million and build a mansion on it. And even calling it a mansion is an understatement, because this home is a community college. They had plans of putting a tennis court, a basketball court. They also had plans of doing like a spa and like a physical therapy wing in this house. Like, this house was just going to be crazy. There was also going to be like an indoor golf simulator room as well, and this house in total was going to cost $2 million to build. Now, this house was indeed built in the middle of Camas, and as I just mentioned, Camas was a very small town. Only 2,500 people lived there, so a lot of people were complaining about the construction of this house, claiming that the house was too loud and too luxurious, and it kind of disrupted the nature of all of the beauty and scenery. But this house would take forever to build. Even though they had gotten this house in 2017, by the time of March 2022, the house was only halfway done and they only had one potential buyer. But on March 4th, 2022, around 3 a.m., that's when local police would be called to the Richins family household. They had gotten a call from Corey claiming that she had found her husband Eric dead and unresponsive, lying at the end of their bed. And when paramedics got there, unfortunately, there was nothing they could really do for Eric to save him, so when they went to the scene, he was already pronounced dead. As far as Corey's story and what happened, Corey claims that that night they were celebrating the progress on the house that they had just closed on, the $2 million home that they were going to be building. So they had officially just closed on the house and they were having a celebration party. They even had like some people over that night. Corey claims that she had made Eric a Moscow Mule and he drank that drink while he was just laying in bed. Corey claimed that she was laying in bed with Eric while he was drinking this, but then in the middle of the night is when her son got a night terror. So she went into his room to comfort him, but then unfortunately fell asleep in his room. So she woke up, went to the master bedroom, and that's when she found Eric. Paramedics then took Eric to the hospital, and even after trying to do CPR, they didn't really get the chance to save him. And so it was very odd as to how Eric could have passed away. Eric at this time was in his 30s, so he still was very young. He was a very outdoorsy person, so he was super active, always outside, even for the line of work that he did in masonry that required him to have a lot of strength and always be moving his body. He was the type of person that didn't really drink, didn't really smoke. He also kept a very healthy diet as well because of the work that he did. So for this to happen was just very, very odd, because it seemed like Eric didn't have any health conditions that he was suffering with, or any long-term health conditions that he had been suffering with that they can tell. And the paramedics did notice one very odd thing. Even though Corey had told paramedics that she had been performing CPR onto Eric, the paramedics noticed that when they saw Eric, he had a lot of blood in his mouth, and he also had blood all over his body, but weirdly, there was no blood found on Corey. So once Eric's body was taken into autopsy, that's when they did an autopsy and a toxicology report. They would find that Eric would overdose from fentanyl, and the amount of fentanyl that was found in his system was 5 times an illegal dose. And there is a difference between medical grade fentanyl and illegal fentanyl. Sometimes like medical grade fentanyl is what like doctors and nurses will mix into certain medications to help you, but this was not medical grade fentanyl. This was fentanyl that you get from dealers on the streets. And even after all of this, Corey would post onto her Facebook, making many tribute posts to Eric, claiming how hard the death has taken a toll on her and her family, that now she has to just live life without him. Her kids have to now live their life without a father, and she's trying her best to just be a single mom. Now, after this death, the police were looking at this very suspiciously, because at first they were assuming that maybe Eric had died of an overdose of fentanyl, but again, that would just make no sense. If Eric did have any sort of struggles, drug struggles with fentanyl specifically, they would see that in his body. They would see those long-term effects of those drugs within his body, but they weirdly didn't see any of that. So the police do a little bit of digging, and what they find is that Corey and Eric both have 4 life insurance policies together, as well as owning a couple of properties together. So the police start doing a little bit of digging into the insurance policies, and what they find is just a couple months before Eric's death, Corey had gone in and changed all of the sole beneficiaries to all 4 of the life insurance policies, which totaled to have a buyout of around $3.5 million. So she had changed all of the life insurance policies to make herself the sole beneficiary, and she even switched the sole beneficiary to herself to C&E Masonry, Eric's company. And Corey also didn't have any connection to C&E Masonry. This was purely Eric's business. She didn't work for them. She didn't help them in any way. She probably didn't have a passion for masonry as much as Eric did. This is truly just an act of Corey wanting to basically take everything that Eric has worked so hard for in his life away from him. So she did that, and when she made those switches, Corey thought that she was slick by doing this. She thought that she just kind of did it under the rug and no one would find out about it. But what she didn't know was that after these switches were made, Eric got a call from the bank notifying him of all of these switches, and Eric was completely shocked because he didn't know that Corey was doing all of this. So that's when he then switched everything back and made his sister Katie the sole beneficiary of all of his finances, and made Cody, his co-partner of C&E Masonry, the sole beneficiary of the company if something were to happen to him. And weirdly enough, this also wasn't the very first odd thing that Corey has done either. The couple actually went to a trip in Greece just a couple years prior, and while they were there, just like sitting in their hotel room enjoying their trip, that's when Corey had made Eric a drink. But as soon as he took the first sip, he immediately started breaking out in hives. He felt like he couldn't breathe. He started hyperventilating, and he needed to go down to the emergency center at the hotel and be pumped with fluids, and that's how he was able to survive this situation. And after this happened, Eric didn't just, blame this occurrence on something like, oh, maybe the alcohol was expired or maybe they had put something in the drink. He had a very deep feeling that Corey was associated with this, because after this, he would even go on to text his sister saying, quote, "This might sound crazy, but I think she just tried to poison me. I think she tried to kill me." But after this, Eric was able to recover. And then in February of 2022, on Valentine's Day, that's when Eric, at the time, no one was home, his kids were out, and Corey was at work. He walks into the kitchen, and that's when he sees a plate on the table with a sandwich on it. And right next to it was a little note from Corey. And the note was just a little love letter from Corey wishing him a happy Valentine's Day, and that she had made him a sandwich. And so that's when Eric, takes a bite of the sandwich, and immediately after the first bite, he starts noticing the same thing that happened to him when he took that sip from the drink in Greece. He started hyperventilating, he couldn't breathe, his lungs started swelling up, and at the time, no one was home. And so the only way he was able to survive through this situation is because Eric had remembered that one of their sons has allergic reactions to certain ingredients in food, and so because of that, they keep an emergency EpiPen in the glove box of Eric's truck. So he ran outside, went in the glove box, gave himself the EpiPen. He lay down for about 45 minutes, and thankfully he woke up. And when he did, he started to process everything that just happened, and he contacted a friend of his saying again, quote, "I think my wife just tried to poison me, and I don't think it's the first time." So after this happened is when Eric really started to become serious about leaving Corey and made actual plans on leaving her. Eric also at the time believed that Corey was cheating on him because he had found some flirty conversations between her and another male, which we will be talking about those conversations later on in the trial. Now, I know you guys may be thinking, why didn't Eric get a divorce earlier? Even after the first poisoning attempt or the second one, why didn't Eric officially get the divorce? And a lot of people speculate that he probably didn't get a divorce because of his kids. He didn't want to be taken away from his children. He didn't want to have his children grow up in a broken home. And he also feared that he might not be able to see his kids again. Because if he were to go through with a divorce with Corey, he knows that Corey is very manipulative. She's very convincing, and she might even convince a court to sway to never let Eric see his kids again. And he just knew at the time that that really wasn't a risk that he was ready to take. And then in 2020, that's when Eric would meet up with a divorce attorney because he was really being serious about making plans to leave Corey. And at this meeting is when they went over all of his finances, and they discovered all of the money that Corey had been stealing from Eric behind the scenes. They found out that Corey had taken out a $100,000 loan from their home equity. So basically what that means is if you were to buy a house for $350,000 and you already paid off $200,000 of it, you can actually ask for some of that money back just as long as you still pay them back. So given this example, if the situation was the house was $350,000, they already put in $200,000, she asked, "Hey, can I actually borrow $100,000 of that back?" The people that she gives that money to will then say, "Okay, here's $100,000 of your money back, but now you still owe us this $100,000." And she had done all of this and even sent all of the paperwork to her PO box just so that Eric wouldn't find out, and Eric ended up not finding out until this moment. Over the past couple years, she had also withdrew over $250,000 from Eric's bank account without him knowing, and even spent $30,000 overdrafting all of his credit cards. And that was just Eric's personal banking account. She had even stole $150,000 from Eric's business account. And the money that she had stole was actually money that Eric had put aside for taxes at the end of the year so he could pay his income taxes. And when he went to go pay his taxes and there was no money there, he had confronted Corey about it. But then Corey just said like, oh, maybe it was a hacker, or maybe like like someone had stolen that out of your account. I do want to give a big thank you to today's sponsor, PDS Debt. Now, I've struggled with debt personally, especially when I left college. It was just a never-ending cycle of different payments every month, missed payments every month, and trying to keep up with all of your debt and all of your payments all by yourself can be extremely stressful, especially if you have no clue where to start. And thankfully, I had PDS Debt by my side to help me through the process, to not just help me, but help you as well. PDS Debt has customized options for anyone struggling with personal loans, credit card debt, collections, or medical bills, and provides alternative solutions to becoming debt-free. And PDS Debt also has an A+ on the Better Business Bureau, over hundreds and thousands of 5-star reviews on Google, and even holds a 5-star review on Trustpilot. Why? Because PDS Debt has helped hundreds and thousands of people get out of debt. And as I said, sometimes debt can be so overwhelming and just so much to take in, you really don't know where to start. PDS Debt goes beyond the numbers to help you understand your unique financial situation and create a personalized plan designed just for you. There's no minimum credit score required. They're here to help you save more, pay off your debt faster, and put your money back where it's supposed to be, in your pocket. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free, and get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/haileyelizabeth. That's pdsdebt.com/haileyelizabeth, pdsdebt.com/haileyelizabeth. And once again, thank you so much to PDS Debt for sponsoring today's episode. Now back to your episode. And when Eric found out about all of this, he actually did confront Corey that same night about this, and Corey basically pleaded and said sorry. She said that she would pay him back all of the money that she owed him, and this kind of scared Corey when Eric found out about this, because afterwards she even spoke with a friend, and this conversation would be later shown at court, and it definitely confirms that Corey was seeing another man while married to Eric, because in this conversation she had said, quote, "It would be better if Eric Richins was dead. I'm in love with a man that's not my husband, and I want to, but I can't break up my family. It's having your cake and eating it too. I do just want to love you. I do love you." And apparently this friend that she was texting was the person that she was having this affair with. So they responded with, quote, "I thought you were getting a divorce." And Corey responds with, quote, "That's what I'm saying. What if that's in a year? You're just supposed to sit around and wait for me? No, I would never ask you, LOL. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, the huge home that they were currently building, the $2 million over luxurious home. Now, it was said that it was more Corey's investment than it was Eric's investment. Eric was completely against the idea of them putting out all this money for this home. He just thought that it was super unreasonable. This is Camas, Utah. 2,500 people live here, and not that many people are going to be in the market for a $5 to $6 million home. Literally, the reason why people move to Utah is so that they don't have to spend $5 to $6 million on a home. So he was really putting down his foot during this time because he just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do, and this created a lot of arguments, and Corey took big offense to this. And the police now know that this is everything that was going on while Eric was alive, and even Corey's actions after Eric's death is just as odd, because the day after Eric's death, Corey went on to have another party at her house, and this was in celebration of her closing on the house that she was currently building, which first is kind of odd because Corey had claimed that she had this exact same party the night that Eric had died, but now she's having the same party the next day, and she didn't even tell any of the guests at her party that Eric had passed away the night before. The only reason most of the guests at the party found out about Eric's death was because Eric's family had showed up to Corey's house to confront her. They also told her that if she had anything to do with this, she wouldn't get anything financially from Eric's death, because Eric had actually found out that she had made herself the sole beneficiary and had secretly changed everything over to Eric's sister Katie and his co-worker Cody. Now, this is the first time that Corey is hearing about about all of this because, again, she thought that she was super slick and that she had gotten away with this. And so when Katie is telling her all of this and is like getting into an argument with her, it made Corey so mad that she attacked Katie and punched her in the head and punched her in the eye. And then the very next day, so 2 days after the death of Eric, it seemed like Corey wasn't really believing Katie when she was saying all of that stuff the day before. So Corey had hired a locksmith because in Corey and Eric's master bedroom, they had a safe in the closet, and in this safe was all of like their life insurance policies, their wills, all their important documents, and supposedly $100,000 cash. So Corey calls in a locksmith, they open up the safe, and inside was no cash at all, and all of these updated documents proving that the sole beneficiary of everything was indeed going to Katie, and also C&E Masonry was going to Cody. And as Corey was going through this will, that's when she found out that Eric had cut her out of the will completely. So then over the next 2 weeks, that's when Corey would put all of her time and energy into renovating this home that she had just closed on, because it seemed like in this moment, Corey already had plans of doing this, but it was Eric that was restricting from those plans. So now that Eric is passed away, now it seems like Corey is just moving on with her plans. And so she completely dedicates all her time into this house, and she ends up only getting it half built and then puts it out on the market for $3.7 million. So even now, the house is just like the bare bones. The police also started to notice a couple of inconsistencies in Corey's story as well. As I mentioned earlier, within her story, she said that her son was having a night terror, so she went into his room, read him a book, and she claims that she had her phone in there with her, but she was charging her phone as she accidentally fell asleep in there. But what the police found when searching through her phone, that her phone was actually unlocked and locked multiple times in the hour leading up to 3:22 a.m. when she called the police. They also found so many text message threads, but all of these messages were unfortunately deleted. She had deleted all of the text messages from January 2nd, so a long time before Eric's death, and even the text messages a couple days after Eric's death. But then that's when the police get a pretty good tip from a person that comes forward, and in the court documents they're referred to as CL. And CL claims that she had actually given Corey some drugs and was contacted by Corey between the time of December 2021 and February of 2022. She claims that the first time Corey had reached out to her, she was asking her for some pain medications, and claims that it was for one of Corey's investors who was complaining of back pain. And so that's when CL got in contact with a dealer and then gave Corey a pill called hydrocodone, which is basically like a Vicodin but a little bit stronger. But then 2 weeks after that, that's when CL was contacted again by Corey and saying that she wanted something a little bit stronger this time, and even said, quote, some of that Michael Jackson stuff. Corey would then purchase 15 to 30 pills of fentanyl for $900. And then 3 days later, on Valentine's Day, that's when Corey decides to make Eric a sandwich, place it on the table, leave the house, and then when Eric ate that sandwich, out of the first bite, he fell into an extreme allergic reaction and had to use an EpiPen in order to save his own life. But after this attempt, Corey would then contact CL for a third time, asking for more pills, and would purchase again 15 to 30 pills of fentanyl for $900. Now, the day before Eric's death, that's when Corey claims that they were having this big party celebrating the closing on the house, but that would actually be false, because the day before, Corey and Eric actually got into a pretty heated argument, and within this argument, that's when Eric had told Corey that he was thinking about cutting Corey out of his will completely. Now, what Corey didn't know was that Eric had already done this when he got the phone call from the bank and had switched everything over, so technically everything was fine, but he had just told her that he was thinking about it. And then when Corey found out that he had actually already changed everything over, she actually attempted at disputing the will and trying to get some money, but all of these disputes were denied. And also the day before Eric's death, Corey would also spend most of her day getting into heated phone calls with a bunch of these investors that she owed money to, because even Corey herself owed around $3 million to all of her investors. She had owed one lender $1.8 million, and then she also owed $200,000 to the IRS, and then she also owed $550,000 to Eric. So it makes sense why Eric was kind of pushing Corey not to purchase this $2 million home, given how much debt she's already in. Nothing to Corey really happened. The police never looked into her. They questioned her a couple times, but they weren't really going out of their way to find evidence or anything. And since the police just wasn't doing their job, that's when Eric's family decided to hire a private investigator to kind of keep tabs on Corey and try to find specific things about Corey that could possibly incriminate her. And also during this time, Corey had even attempted at suing Eric's family for $3.36 million. And she was basically claiming that the family was harassing her. They were coming to her home and yelling outrageous claims at her. She also said that they were scaring her children and that she didn't want them around anymore. And then on March 5th, 2023, on the 1-year anniversary of Eric's death, that is when Corey would put out her brand new book, Are You With Me? And from the book's description, this book was said to be about, quote, Are You With Me is written to create peace and comfort for children who have lost a loved one. It's to reassure children that although your loved one is not present, the presence always exists as they walk through life with you as if they were here. A heartwarming and reassuring book that gently guides children through a difficult experience of losing a loved one, written by a loving mother who personally faced this challenge. This book is designed to offer comfort and solace to young minds in a way that is both accessible and engaging. With vivid and colorful illustrations, Are You With Me follows the story of a child who has lost their father, but who is reminded of his presence still exists all around them, just like an angel watching over them. Whether it's playing at the park or simply enjoying a quiet moment at home, the child is comforted by the knowledge that their father is always by their side. As a book that celebrates the resilience of the human spirit, Are You With Me is a must-read for any child who has experienced the pain of loss, and for the parents who want to provide their children with the emotional support they need to heal and grow. And then after this, Corey would just go on multiple media outlets, just kind of doing press for this new book, and would also go on KPCW radio.
She joins me now in the studio. Good morning. And so sorry to hear about your loss.
No, thank you. I appreciate it very much. It's been a long year, difficult year. And kind of writing this book has brought a little peace to me and my boys.
So take us back to last year. I mean, you've told me it's a rough go, and you felt a bit helpless as you were helping trying to get your kids to heal.
Yes, exactly. So my husband passed away unexpectedly March 4th of last year. And, as we were kind of going through the trials and navigation of different feelings and emotions, we, kind of just sat, and at the same time, we were looking for different resources to help us. Like, we've obviously never been through this. My kids have never been through this. So, nighttime readings are big for us. And so we kind of started looking through Barnes & Noble and Amazon and things that can kind of comfort, us through the nights during, and we just could not find anything that really was relevant for my kids and for our situation. And so, we're just like, well, let's write our own.
Yeah. So not having read the book, I mean, is there some religious sense to it?
There's not. Honestly, I'm not religious. There's no religion. As long as you believe in heaven, right, and afterlife, then it would be good for you. Kind of the three main points that I have discovered, I guess, in the last year is connection, continuity, and care.
So how are y'all doing? You guys, I mean, I guess you have good and bad days?
It's good and bad days. Yeah, some days you're like, okay, I got this. Like, we're okay, and we can figure this out. And there's other days, and it's like, what the heck? What am I doing? Like,
And would even do another interview on Good Things Utah on ABC.
If it's a parent, a sibling, or a friend, talking about loss with kids can be a tricky subject.
Joining us now is author of Are You With Me, Corey Richins, to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief. And Corey, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
so my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us, and he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year. And, hoping that it can kind of help other kids, deal with this and kind of find happiness some way or another. I'm new to all of this, so kind of doing all, research and reading books and things to try and understand, not only how to grieve as a widow, as a wife, but also, with my kids, how to help them understand what just happened. And what I have kind of found is, as I mentioned, it's kind of the 3 C's is how I visualize it, and it's connection, continuity, and care.
There's a promotion right now. Get a free copy of the book April 30th and May 1st through Amazon Kindle. You are an amazing woman and mom, and we thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this and touching the lives of others.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
In this interview, she would also discuss a new book that she's coming out with called Mom, How Far Away is Heaven? And it was going to be a book to help children cope with loss and overcome those rough patches. And she said that this one is going to be more focused onto God and religion, and it's going to be about a little girl losing her mom. And Corey also said that she planned on making this a whole series. She wanted to do another one about a little boy that lost his mother and then a little girl that lost her sibling. And throughout this interview, Corey never explicitly says how her husband died or why her husband died. She just claims that he died unexpectedly. But on April 7th, 2023, just a month after this book was released, that's when Corey was arrested for the murder of her husband, Eric. And also when she was arrested, even crazier news came out that she didn't even write her first book, Are You Still With Me? She didn't even write that book. She had actually paid someone to write that book for her, and it was made in like a week. And Corey had used a book writing service called Book Writing Lane. Basically, you contact them, you give them your ideas and what you're thinking, how long you want the book to be, and it's usually anywhere from $2,500 to $6,000 per book. And so Corey had contacted Book Writing Lane, told them what she wanted, that she wanted a children's book with illustrations, and then they just made it for her. And the only reason people know for sure that she used this service is because she left a review on it. And in her review, she would say, quote, "These guys did an amazing job at taking what I wanted illustrated and my words and ideas for the book and bring it to life. Highly recommended." So all of that talk, like that she was talking about earlier about her and her boys were working on this book and healing through this book, none of that was real because she literally paid someone to do it for her. But when Corey was officially arrested and her trial came up, this is when all of the details for the past year, all of the things that the police have been doing behind the scenes, started to come to light. In June of 2023, that's when Corey would try to argue for bail. And in this 4-hour hearing, they would present evidence, several witnesses, a cell phone analyst, and the leading detective was also there just to make sure that she doesn't get bail. What they found was that in November of 2023, while in prison, Corey had made motions to just dismiss her entire case, just like throw her whole case out the window. Obviously, this was dismissed. And then in January of 2024, new evidence would be released, so just last year, where they ended up finding traces of a drug called quidapine, and I hope I'm saying that right, but they ended up finding that specific drug in the stomach of Eric, and this is a drug that's usually used for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Now, although Eric didn't take that medication, Corey actually did. They also did a search through Corey's phone and found that after Eric's death, Corey had looked up things on her phone through Google saying things like, quote, "Can FBI find deleted message?" and, quote, "What is a lethal dose of fentanyl?" Now, when Corey was questioned about this, she basically said that she just searched those things up as a way to educate herself, just in case she was being accused with something like that, then like she would know, even though she has an attorney and a lawyer that she could ask. While in prison, Corey would also send a 60-page manuscript to a fellow cellmate that allegedly had a lot of very specific details about her crime in that letter, but unfortunately that manuscript was never recovered. But what was recovered was another letter that they found in Corey's cell. Now, this was an unsent letter that they believed that Corey was going to send to her mother. It was a 6-page letter and it was titled "Walk the Dog." And in this letter, Corey quite literally is just outing herself. For context, before we read this letter, it's about 6 pages, but I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to read like chunks of each page. But in this letter, for context, Ronnie is her brother, and Corey is trying to let her mom know of the story that Ronnie has to say, basically telling him to lie so that everything makes sense. She starts off the letter by saying, quote, "Sky is saying even if the gummies have fentanyl in them, the prosecutor will say I tried to put fentanyl in the gummies, so Eric would have them. Stupid, I know, but that's just what she's thinking. We'll still test them though. However, she wants to link Eric getting drugs and pills from Mexico, so we need some kind of connection. Her private investigator is doing some research on ranch/cartel places Eric would stay at. Here's what I'm thinking, but just have to talk to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this, but it's super short, not a lot to it. He will need to tell Sky at the meeting next week. Upon information and belief," in quotations, just like they say. A year prior, so for context, so this is basically what Corey is telling her brother Ronnie to say if he needs to testify. A year prior to Eric's death, Ronnie was over watching football one Sunday, and Eric and Ronnie were chatting about Eric's Mexico trips. Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico from the workers at the ranch. Eric told him not to tell me because I would get mad because I said he always gets high every night and won't help take care of the kids. In quotations. There are pictures in my phone of Eric passed out on the floor or in a chair. Ronnie should have these texts from Eric talking about getting high as well. Eric told Ronnie he keeps them in an allergy pill in his work truck so I wouldn't find them. Ronnie never told me about the conversation. Eric finally told me and asked if Carmen could get him some. Eric never wanted anyone to know he had an issue, especially getting caught. He always wanted Corey to go down for him. When they traveled, Eric would put his drugs in Corey's bag at the lines right before they boarded. That way, if they were caught, Corey would get in trouble, not him. Once they got to wherever they were going, Eric would pull the drugs out of her bag and it would cause a huge fight. She was pissed he would risk her going to jail for the drug use. He would just laugh about it. Eric couldn't run his image that he had drug issues, so he would do whatever he had to. Corey has never done any type of pill, didn't like them. Rarely would she consume THC, only if Eric begged her because it was a special occasion. So now there's a little star, so now it's back to Corey talking to her mom. Reword this however he needs to, just make sure the point just include it all. The connection needs to be made with Mexico and drugs. Ronnie will have the messages to prove Eric confided in him about getting high. It can be straight to the point but has to be done. Upon information and belief, LOL. They never found pain pills and fentanyl in my house because he hid it in an allergy bottle in his work truck, and Cody emptied out the work truck within a week, so they were never found. When you talk to Ronnie about this, Travis, meet up with him in person. I worry sometimes your house and phone are bugged. Maybe drive down to SL and meet him after work without Bree. Sky has to make sure the connection between Eric and Mexico because that makes the most sense in her mind. If it's Ronnie's information and belief about the conversation over football, she can use that as a connection. Tell Ronnie don't overanalyze it. It's just 2 quick minutes of conversation. LOL. Tell him I need him to do this. Bring me home and then we will get those damn bees. Also, please text Lotto. For context, Lotto is the affair. Tell him do not text me anything about us doing things / together ever, like church, skiing trips, nothing that puts us together. It doesn't look good. We're so close to the end. Let's push through. Have the conversation with Ronnie before he meets with Sky. Then tell him to tell Sky at the meeting about the conversation. Hang in there. We're almost there. I love you to the moon. And then she also puts in, take vague notes of all of this so you remember before you walk the dog. And then the first half of this page is just her talking about insurance and mortgage. So I'm going to take it from the bottom, which says, quote, remember I told you one way to get at Katie is going through my phone and finding a picture of her girls, even with the boys. Print 15 copies and send them out anonymously to different media companies. Obviously, don't email the pictures so it's not traceable. She would be livid if it got out to the public. You would just have to do it sneakily and be careful. She would try and trace it back to you. If not, no worries. And then page 5 says, quote, please tell Chelsea to bring up the fact that he hasn't been to church in 13 years. She has known him, and Eric would brag to her about how much he drank and did pills in high school. Tell Kelsey to say Eric always wanted Corey to go down for him. For example, he would put drugs in her suitcase when we would travel together, so if anyone got caught, it was Corey. He would put it in her bag right before they left the house so Corey didn't know. Then when we would land wherever, Eric would take them out of the bag and Corey would be pissed and they would argue about it. All Kelsey has to say is how Eric didn't care and would just laugh about it and say, well, I can't get in trouble, as if it was okay that I got in trouble. Have Selma talk about Eric in Spain not being able to drink, so he was looking for drugs the entire time, and explain the drink the waitress gave to him and how I called his doctor and went to the pharmacy immediately. Have Allie talk about how the sisters have always been jealous of me because anything they could do, Corey could do better. Being a mom, college, stay-at-home wife until she built $1 million company, a nice house, car, everything she had, they wanted. This came down to jealousy, money, and Eric's partying that they don't want to acknowledge, and sadly, an accidental overdose. Lastly, don't forget to work on the gun receipts. We want to file charges and let the prosecutor not do anything about it to use in our defense. Will you buy a box of Crest White strips, open them up, put them in an envelope, and have Sky glue them to me? You can tell her what's in the envelope. I'm sure she won't care. I'll make sure they can't be found in my cell. My teeth are yellow so much from coffee and tea all day. I love you. Hang in there. We're getting there slowly. You're the best mom in the whole world. I'm so lucky to have you. So even that letter right there is very, very incriminating. And then after that was read to the court, Corey was forced no contact with her mother or her brother until after her sentencing. And the court actually tried to gain her another charge by considering this as witness tampering, but for some reason this charge was just dismissed. Now, Corey's most recent trial has been in April of 2025, so this year, where she was actually given 24 new charges. These 24 new charges would include things such as aggravated murder, attempted murder, forgery, insurance fraud, as well as other tax fraud charges. But all of those, like tax fraud charges, will most likely be at a different trial and not into the trial of the murder of her husband. And when she was given these new charges, there was also so much more evidence that was brought to the table, especially like her burner phones. Corey had multiple burner phones, and when the police looked through these burner phones, they would find very suspicious Google searches such as, quote, Women Utah Prison, and How to Permanently Delete Information from an iPhone Remotely. How long does it take for life insurance to pay? If someone was poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Again, very, very specific and also very, very incriminating Google searches. There would be no other reason for her to be Googling those things. And then at the trial is also where they would bring up Corey's affair with this other person. And they would also reveal the text message conversations between the two, with one of the conversations was Corey saying, quote, "If I was divorced right now and you asked to marry me tomorrow, you would? And I just want to lay on the couch and cuddle you, watch a murder documentary and snuggle. I want you today, every day, not sexually, but physically, mentally. Every day when I wake up, I do want a future together. I do want you. Figure out life together. If he could just go away and you could live here, life would be so perfect. I love you." Now, when the defense saw all of this new evidence, they tried every trick in the book to try to get this evidence thrown out. They at one point claimed that they couldn't use any of this evidence because when the police had questioned and interrogated Corey, apparently they had spoken to her for 5 hours without reading her Miranda rights, and so that was like a reason they were trying to get this evidence thrown out. They also claimed that the search warrant for Corey's burner phones was overly broad and that they didn't actually know what exactly they were looking for. And then apparently they were just like searching through the entire phone when they weren't allowed to do that, even though I'm pretty sure they can. There was also another inmate of Corey that came forward and said that this one time when she was walking around the jail, she had seen Corey on a video call where she held up a piece of paper to the person on the video call as if she had written something down on the paper and didn't want to say it out loud, so she just showed it to them. And then after this, the officers tried to search her cell for this piece of paper, but unfortunately couldn't find it.
Are you aware if some of those documents have since been found to be privileged documents?
Are you asking me, were they in that envelope that I was
Well, no, right,
searching?
I'm asking you if the documents that you were reading that were in the envelope contained privileged documents.
Yes, I wasn't reading them, though.
Well, you were going through, you said hundreds of documents.
Yeah.
So you would have had to have at least read some to get an idea of what they were, correct?
Inspecting. Looking at, the heading on it. Like, court paperwork to me is pretty obvious, like headings.
Well, there were a lot of handwritten documents in that envelope, correct?
Correct.
And you determined not to seize any of those documents, correct? Mm-hmm. And you, as you were reading those documents, you determined that some of them were privileged and you should stop reading them, correct?
I didn't read them.
Then how did you know what they were?
Just glancing at them.
Okay.
We also learned at this trial that Corey was surprisingly very open with asking people for fentanyl. Apparently, she had asked her handyman for fentanyl, and she had even asked her housekeeper, and she was just going around and asking people if they had fentanyl or if they had these specific drugs. And so again, this really wasn't something that Corey was trying to hide, and it was something that she had been planning for a while. Now, as for Corey's trial now, her trial has just been delayed so many times. Every time they reveal new evidence, they have like small trial dates for those, but it's not a trial that involves sentencing. And so now her next trial date is supposed to be in February of 2026. And yeah, that is the end of today's case. If you guys found this case interesting, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I would love to hear all of your guys' comments about the case down below. Since Corey's case hasn't come up yet, a lot of people are still on the fence of guilty or not guilty, which in my opinion, I feel like there's just way too much evidence, or at least the evidence that we see now, it really just does all point to her being guilty. And I feel like with these new 24 different charges, it also implies that possibly they have even more evidence to convict her of the actual murder. But again, her trial isn't until February 2026, and I will be trying to keep up with the case until then. But yeah, I hope you guys found this case interesting, and as always, I love you, I love you, I love you, and I will see you guys next week.